Hello students, this is step 5, your final part to finishing your still life. Here's the supplies that I used. Here's my still life reference photo. I found this project frustrating. I did not really enjoy painting this. I think it's mostly because I tried to do it in one sitting. I think that assigning all of the color at one time wasn't wise. I would have really liked to do it in at least 2 sittings, if not 3. But we as a class kind of ran out of time, and I have wanted to make it as easy as possible for you. So with my hindsight, I recommend not doing it all at one time. I was impatient and anxious, and I messed up a lot, and it was frustrating. Kind of like when you feel rushed in class. I was trying to do too much. Another recommendation is to have 2 jars of water. I found that I just really needed clean water to make sure my brushes were clean, and I didn't want to have to keep getting up to change my water. I did that anyway, but it is easier with 2 jars. I also use 2 palettes. I know a lot of you don't have extra palettes, but a paper plate with any paper plate or a paper plate with saran wrap on it works perfectly fine. I want you to notice here and throughout the video how I'm putting down paint. I know I've watched you guys paint this year, and I know that this is not come naturally, but I make sure that there's a lot of paint on my brush, and I just put it down. So I even get a little bit carried away in this painting, and I put too much paint on the canvas. But if you just take a color and you place it where you think it will be better than trying to rub on the paint and not having enough and having it dry out on the palette. And then if you only mix a little bit of paint and it dries out, then you have to remix that color, and you also start kind of compromising and just rubbing like really gross scraps onto your canvas. And you want good paint. You want to be excited by your colors and put them on your canvas. And so just help yourself by mixing enough paint and really loading up your brush. Another recommendation is to cut out a lot of details. So here I'm adding in some red detailing, but you can, if you look at it, I didn't really do that great of a job. You can't really read it, and the Asian markings on the front of the takeout box are really blurred, and I even kind of rubbed the paint later. The flowers, everything about this painting, especially since I was doing it so quickly, I just didn't want to do all the details. I was pretty lazy today, and I don't want you guys to have to worry about all the details either. As the artist, you can decide to take or leave something, and if you let it dry, you can always paint over. So here I'm painting this box like this gray color, and later I just realized that I hated this gray and I painted over it. Having hair dryer is nice, but also see how I blurred it. Acrylic paint dries really fast. I slowed this part down because I just wanted you to be able to watch how I lay the paint down. I kind of, especially if your paint is see-through and you're seeing the canvas through it, it's sometimes nice to like lay the first layer down So here I'm just painting his whole nose like one green. And then I take like my darker shade and I put down a layer of dark. And, okay, I'm gonna do light first. Sorry. I fill up my paintbrush with a light green. I do the light side of his nose, and then I do the dark side of his nose. And then if you take a clean brush and you just mix them together, then that's called blending, and it's just a really easy way to shade. Putting a light color and a dark color next to each other and mixing them together. Also, another reminder, I have so much to tell you, is when you want to lighten a color, remember what colors are light, what colors are dark. So if you see a light color, you don't necessarily need to add white. You can use a lot of different colors to lighten a color. So if I want to make like a really light red color, I could lighten it with white and make like a pinkish, kind of like not as bright pink. Or if I could just use orange, or I could use yellow. You just have to just use any color that's lighter than that color. So it's like if I wanted to make a black lighter, I could pretty much use any color to lighten it. If I wanted to lighten a blue, I could use like green, yellow, white. It just takes a lot of practice, but sometimes you can get a nicer, richer color if you don't use white. Remember, white kills color. It'll always dull your colors and make them more muted, like a pastel. So here I'm just adding in the greens. I was so impatient with this painting, and I think that the only really interesting, because I was so impatient, like my shapes and my details are really not very good. I think the only thing that was interesting about the painting when I was done is the contrast, and that I was able to remember like where my light was coming from. I'll come back to that. Right now I'm just putting in the background. I chose a light green and a dark green so that I could make a gradient so it would look like the light was shining on one side. Now I'm going to put in the table. I also completely made this up. The only thing that I'm copying from the picture for this part is where the light's falling. So right here I'm painting in a really light orange, and I see the other places where the light is on my table, and then I use a darker orange mixed with some like a brownish color to make it dark. Anyway, a shade darker, and then it's just orange out of the tube. So I kind of have a gradient, and then I use a clean brush to mix them. This wasn't perfect, and I definitely did a lot of touch-ups on this. I think that it helps to add the realism of the painting if you have really the light. The strongest thing that will hold your painting together is where the light's coming from. Okay, this portion is actually important. I did not want to paint every single little thing in between the details of my vase, but I did want to make sure I had the shadows, so I put in the shadows and the gradient of my vase before the details. So right now it's just a plain white vase that has a shadow on it, and I made sure it was dry, and then I put the details on after. This is just so much easier. I also used several blues for the details, but that wasn't really necessary. I just kind of felt like it, but I used a lighter blue to make it look like one side was lighter, and I used like a purple in the shadows, and I used just blue for this portion. I also completely made up these. I mean, I looked at the details, but I didn't really copy them. I just made them up myself. I was more inspired than copying. I was very lazy today. This video is a little bit long, but the best parts are yet to come. It's just important to, it's just helpful to remember when you have an image that has so many details, that you work smarter, not harder. So in the case of the vase, it was working smarter to paint the vase and then paint the details on top. Same with like the highlights. So on Yoshi, you can see that I've already done this for his shoes a little bit, where I put down the orange of his shoes, and then on top I painted the white. I didn't paint them at the same time, and later I'm going to do more highlights on Yoshi, and you'll see that. So I have his green body, and then I let it dry, and then I put the white on top. With this painting, I was very frustrated, so I understand where you guys are coming from, and a lot of you, it's not your favorite thing. Ugh, look at that. I've just completely painted over his black of his eye. So I took like a clean wet brush, and this is me wiping off the black of his eye. Alright, here come the highlights, I think. First I'm putting in the dark so that I can kind of define his hands, because I just kind of made them like circle blobs. It's completely up to you how much detail to put in, but I do ask you that you would cover the entire canvas. So I would love to not see any of the white canvas on this is your final piece. You painted a lot this year. Sometimes it's difficult because the texture of the canvas, but just use a little bit more water and make sure that you cover it completely. That was kind of nice for me, that my underpainting was like a kind of a electric blue, so if I was missing spots, it was kind of obvious. You realize how important the underpainting is when you start painting, especially stuff like the background, where the underpainting was too light, and so when I painted that dark green, you could just see through it. It wasn't great. So maybe a darker undercoat would have been nice. Or if you're painting like the human face and you put an underpainting of like electric green, and then you start painting skin tones over it, you're gonna look kind of sickly, etc. I don't know if that made sense, but this is the best part. The little highlights, they're just kind of like so satisfying. You can use a lot of paint and just touch it up. You can see around Yoshi's shoes that it's kind of stripy. I started just adding in a lot of free brush strokes that were kind of like a stylized, just kind of like I made it up basically. I was trying to make it look more on purpose, like make my messiness look more on purpose. I did that here too in the background. When you add like stripes to things, it distracts your eye from all the mistakes underneath. It's like if you did a drawing and then you cover it over with a pen. You like add an outline and some like nice shading on top, and you're like, oh, that looks so good, because your eyes looking at more than just one thing. It's like having a pattern on a shirt. You can see your ketchup stain a lot less. This is the mess I made, my two palettes, having my warm colors and my cool colors. Here's the painting in all its glory, all its messiness. Ta-da!